Nero Wolfe, and the royal invitation. It was a Monday in late January, the kind of day when New York wrapped itself in grey wool and forgot to apologize for it. I was at my desk in the office, pretending to organize last month's expense accounts while actually wondering whether Fritz would serve the duckling with orange sauce or the braised lamb for lunch. Nero Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms with Theodore, communing with his orchids and probably lecturing some innocent Cattleya about proper behavior. The brownstone was quiet, except for the familiar sounds, Fritz humming something Germanic in the kitchen, the radiators doing their winter symphony, and the occasional click of claws on hardwood as one of the guardians made their rounds. That's what the delivery people and occasional clients had taken to calling our 6 canine sentinels, Wolfe's guardians. Caesar, the massive calm-eyed alpha, was sprawled near the front hall, his bulk sufficient to give pause to anyone with hostile intentions. Mars prowled the ground floor with purposeful aggression, while Apollo kept watch from the window seat, his sharp eyes tracking every pedestrian on West 35th Street. The three others had their own territories. Minerva, the thinker of the pack, observed from the shadows near Wolfe's desk, her intelligent gaze missing nothing. Diana, small and lightning-quick, patrolled between floors with restless energy, and Loyal, 45 pounds of brick-red courage wearing his hand-tooled leather collar that Fritz had commissioned with Loyal burned into it, was curled near my feet, though one ear remained perked for any irregularity. The doorbell rang at 10:47. Caesar's head lifted. Mars materialized from the hall. Through the bulletproof one-way glass panel installed in the door, one of many security upgrades Saul Panzer and I had designed after an incident involving a previous client with poor impulse control. I could see a figure in diplomatic livery, full morning coat, striped trousers, the works. I crossed to the door. Yes? Mr. Archie Goodwin? The voice was accented, cultured, and carried the peculiar certainty of someone accustomed to doors opening for him. That's me. I represent the Montavian embassy. I have a communication for Mr. Nero Wolfe that requires personal delivery. Through the glass I could see he was maybe 50, with silver hair, and the kind of posture that suggested military training overlaid with diplomatic polish. He held a leather portfolio embossed with what looked like a coat of arms. Mr. Wolfe sees people by appointment only. You can leave whatever you have with me. I'm afraid that's impossible. My instructions are explicit. I considered this. The man looked legitimate, but then again, so had the insurance adjuster who turned out to be working for a murder suspect. Hold that portfolio up to the glass. Open it. He did. Inside was a single envelope, maybe 8 by 10 inches, made of heavy cream-colored paper that probably cost more per sheet than my last suit. It was sealed with what appeared to be actual wax, stamped with an ornate crest. Gold thread was visible at the edges. Fancy, I said, but I'm still not opening the door until I've made some calls. The envelope contains an invitation from Her Majesty Queen Theodora of Montavia. Perhaps you recognize the royal seal. I didn't, but I wasn't about to admit it. Wait there. I went to my desk and pulled up the State Department's diplomatic recognition database on my computer. Montavia checked out a small principality in the Alps, bordered by Switzerland and Austria. Population around 80,000, constitutional monarchy since 18. Current monarch, Queen Theodora Adelina Marguerite, age 58, succeeded her father in 2. Fair enough. I returned to the door and opened it, after checking that Caesar and Mars had taken flanking positions. The diplomat stepped inside with the careful movements of someone who'd spotted the dogs. His eyes flicked to the bulletproof glass, the reinforced door frame, the discreetly placed security cameras. Mr. Wolfe values his privacy, I see. Mr. Wolfe values his life, and so do I. The envelope? He handed over the portfolio. I am to wait for a response. You'll be waiting a while. Mr. Wolfe doesn't like to be disturbed during his morning session with his orchids. Can I offer you coffee? That would be most gracious. I showed him to the front room, which we kept for visitors who weren't quite clients yet. It was comfortable without being intimate. Leather chairs, neutral walls, nothing that revealed anything about Wolfe or his methods. Loyal followed us, his brown eyes fixed on the stranger with an intensity that made the diplomat shift in his seat. Your dog seems vigilant. They all are. Fritz will bring coffee. I found Fritz in the kitchen, hands deep in something that smelled like rosemary and garlic. We have a visitor. Coffee for one in the front room. The man from the embassy? I saw him through the window. Very formal. Very. And he brought something with more wax seals than a royal wedding invitation. Fritz wiped his hands and set about the coffee, while I took the portfolio to the office. The envelope was heavier than expected, the paper thick as cardboard. The seal showed a castle on a mountaintop, surrounded by stars, and what might have been alpine flowers. Elegant script announced, Her Majesty Queen Theodora of Montavia requests the honor of Mr. Nero Wolfe's presence. I left it on Wolfe's desk and went back to the front room. The diplomat was sitting precisely as I'd left him, hands folded, back straight. Loyal hadn't moved either, still watching. Your dog is very well trained, the diplomat said. Dobermans. 5 Dobermans and 1 American Pit Bull Terrier. Loyal here is the pit. He's also the most perceptive. Does he detect something concerning about me? He detects everything concerning about everybody. It's his job. Fritz appeared with coffee on a silver tray. The good china. Because Fritz treated all visitors as potentially important until proven otherwise, the diplomat accepted with murmured thanks. At 11 o'clock precisely, I heard the elevator descending. Wolfe's schedule was invariant. Plant rooms from 9 to 11, lunch at 1, more plants from 4 to 6. He entered the office, saw me at my desk, grunted, and settled his 1/7 of a ton into the custom-built chair behind his desk. Then he spotted the envelope. What's that? Invitation from a queen. There's a diplomat in the front room waiting for your answer. His eyes narrowed. Queen? Montavia. It's real. I checked. The envelope has enough gold thread to stock a craft store and more wax than a candle factory. He picked it up, studied the seal, then broke it with his letter opener. The sound was satisfying, like cracking the spine of a particularly resistant book. He extracted a single sheet of paper and another smaller envelope. I watched his face as he read. The expressions crossed it like clouds over the sun. Skepticism, irritation, interest, quickly suppressed. And finally, what might have been the faintest spark of curiosity. Archie. Yes, sir? Show the gentleman in. The diplomat's name was Helmut Brenner, and he carried himself like someone who'd spent decades navigating the treacherous waters between royal whim and diplomatic necessity. He took the red leather chair, accepted Wolfe's offer of beer, declined, and sat with his hands precisely arranged on his knees. Mr. Wolfe, I bring greetings from Her Majesty Queen Theodora and the royal household of Montavia. Wolfe grunted. He'd read both letters and now had them arranged before him on the desk. You are aware of the contents of these communications? Only in general terms. I know Her Majesty wishes to consult you on a matter of extreme delicacy. She wishes me to travel to Castle Belvoir to investigate what she describes as a matter grave enough to threaten the realm itself. She is remarkably unspecific about the nature of this threat. That, I believe, is intentional. The second letter provides more detail? It does. It suggests that someone close to the Queen has been murdered, that the accused is someone she trusts completely, and that the evidence is too convenient to be credible. She wants me to discover the truth before a potential diplomatic crisis becomes public. Brenner nodded. Her Majesty has followed your career with interest. Several years ago, you solved a matter involving the Belgian trade delegation, the Dubois affair. Precisely. Your discretion was much appreciated in European diplomatic circles. When this current situation arose, your name was the first mentioned. I don't travel, Wolfe said flatly. I particularly don't travel in January to Alpine principalities where I presume the temperature is inhospitable and the cuisine uncertain. The Queen's chef is Lionel Gaultier, formerly of Restaurant Tire Levant in Paris. He trained under... Wolfe's hand came up. Don't. The answer is no. I cleared my throat. Before Mr. Brenner leaves, maybe we should discuss the retainer mentioned in the letter, the one that involves more zeros than a freshman math class. Wolfe glared at me. Brenner almost smiled. The Queen is prepared to compensate you handsomely for your time and inconvenience, Brenner said. The figure mentioned is merely a starting point. She is also prepared to cover all expenses, provide secure accommodation at the castle, and ensure that your return to New York is swift and comfortable the moment your investigation concludes. The answer, Wolfe repeated, is no. May I ask why? If the compensation is insufficient, the compensation is irrelevant. I have orchids that require my attention. I have routines that I am unwilling to disrupt. I have a home that provides me with everything necessary for my comfort and my work. Why would I abandon all this to freeze in a castle and interrogate aristocrats? Because, Brenner said quietly, the man accused of murder is Chef Gaultier, and the evidence against him, a vial of poison in his quarters, a witness who saw him near the victim's room, a motive involving a decades-old grudge is so thoroughly documented that he will certainly be convicted unless someone proves his innocence. Her Majesty believes he is being framed, but she cannot prove it without help. Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Who is the victim? The Queen's cousin, Lord Edmund Rothwell. He died 3 days ago after consuming soup prepared personally by Chef Gaultier. The poison was arsenic, administered in sufficient quantity to cause death within hours. And the witness? A chambermaid saw Gaultier leaving Lord Edmund's private apartments 20 minutes before the soup was delivered. She also saw him handling a small vial. The motive? Lord Edmund was instrumental in denying Chef Gaultier's brother a position in the royal household 15 years ago. The brother subsequently died in poverty. This is documented in letters that were found in Chef Gaultier's rooms. Wolfe leaned back. Caesar, who'd followed Brenner into the office, raised his head and watched his master's face. The big dog knew Wolfe's moods better than most humans. It is, Wolfe said slowly, remarkably tidy. Too tidy, Her Majesty believes. And why does she care? If she believes Gaultier is innocent, she could simply pardon him. A royal pardon of an accused murderer would trigger a constitutional crisis. Montavia is a small country with a proud tradition of equal justice. If the Queen appears to place herself above the law, there are factions, particularly in Parliament, who would use it to diminish royal authority, perhaps even call for abolishing the monarchy entirely. So she wants me to prove what she cannot. Yes. Wolfe closed his eyes. I knew that posture. He was thinking, weighing, calculating. Beside his chair, Loyal had materialized, drawn by some instinct that told him Wolfe was contemplating something significant. The pit bull's ears were forward, his body tense. The answer is still no, Wolfe said finally. Send the Queen my regrets and my recommendation. She should hire a competent private investigator in Switzerland or France, someone familiar with European legal systems and aristocratic intrigue. I am not that person. Brenner stood. I understand. Her Majesty will be disappointed, but she instructed me not to press if you declined. I thank you for your time, Mr. Wolfe. I showed him out. When I returned, Wolfe was staring at the letters on his desk, his expression sour. You're actually considering it, I said. I am not. Yes, you are. You've got that look, the one you get when a problem is interesting enough to be annoying. The problem is irrelevant. I am not traveling to Europe. Right, because you never change your mind, except for the time you went to Montana, and the time you went to... Those were necessities. This is not. A chef being framed for murder isn't a necessity. It is not my necessity. I sat down. Want me to type up the refusal letter, or should I wait until you've changed your mind? He glowered at me. I have not changed my mind. Not yet, but you will. Want to bet on it? Out. I'm going. But for the record, I think we should take the case. When was the last time someone offered you that much money? When was the last time you got to investigate royalty? Plus, think about it. Castle accommodations, Michelin star chef, probably a wine cellar that makes Rustamans look like a corner store. Out. I went, but I was grinning, because I'd seen his finger tapping the arm of his chair. The tiny tell that meant his mind was working on something it found intriguing despite his protests. The second message arrived on Wednesday. I was upstairs in the plant rooms, helping Theodore water some phalaenopsis that Wolfe had acquired at auction, when Fritz's voice came over the intercom. Archie, there is another visitor from the embassy. He says it's urgent. I went down. This time it wasn't Brenner, but a younger man, maybe 30, with the kind of pale, shocked face that suggested bad news had arrived ahead of him. Mr. Goodwin, my name is Peter Talbot. I'm the Deputy Cultural Attaché at the Montavian Embassy. I apologize for arriving without notice, but he stopped, swallowed. There's been another death. I showed him into the office and buzzed Wolfe. When he descended 5 minutes later, moving with the ponderous grace of a cruise ship, negotiating a narrow channel, Talbot stood automatically. Mr. Wolfe, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Her Majesty insisted I inform you immediately. This morning, A chambermaid at Castle Belvoir was found dead, drowned in the castle's reflecting pool. Wolfe settled into his chair. An accident? No. She was struck on the head first. And there was evidence. A piece of embroidery thread, gold, caught in her clothing, the kind used exclusively in the Queen's private chambers. Her name? Lucia Martel. She was the one who testified about seeing Chef Gaultier near Lord Edmund's apartments. Now she's dead, and the investigation has become complicated. Complicated how? The palace guard found the gold thread. It matches embroidery from a set of pillows in Her Majesty's sitting room. The implication is either that the Queen herself is involved, or that someone with access to her private quarters committed the murder. Either way, it's a scandal. Parliament is already demanding an inquiry. The Prime Minister has threatened to resign, and Chef Gaultier remains in custody, now suspected of 2 murders. Wolfe was silent. His eyes were half closed, his breathing slow and regular. I'd seen this before. He was assembling facts, looking for patterns. The first death, he said finally, Lord Edmund. Describe the circumstances in detail. Talbot nodded. Lord Edmund was 53, a career diplomat. He lived in a wing of the castle reserved for royal family members. 3 evenings ago, he dined alone in his apartments, his custom when working late. Chef Gaultier personally prepared the meal: a consommé, roasted pheasant, vegetables, a lemon tart. The soup was delivered at 7 o'clock by one of the kitchen staff. Lord Edmund consumed it while reviewing documents. By 8 o'clock, he was violently ill. By 10, he was dead. The poison was confirmed as arsenic. Yes, a significant dose, mixed into the soup. The concentration was such that death was inevitable once consumed. And Gaultier's connection? He prepared the soup personally. He often did so for royal family members. He was seen leaving Lord Edmund's apartments 20 minutes before the soup was delivered, carrying what the maid later identified as a small vial. And when his quarters were searched, investigators found a bottle of arsenic trioxide hidden in a locked drawer, along with letters detailing his brother's troubles and blaming Lord Edmund. Who found these letters? Inspector Devaux, head of palace security. He conducted the search personally, with 2 witnesses present. And the maid who saw Gaultier, this Lucia Martel, what was she doing near Lord Edmund's apartments? Delivering fresh linens. It was her assigned duty. Wolfe opened his eyes. She died this morning. How? Her body was found at dawn by a groundskeeper. She'd been in the water for several hours. The medical examiner estimates time of death between midnight and 3 a.m. The blow to her head was delivered with a heavy object, possibly a stone from the reflecting pool's decorative border. And the gold thread? Caught in her dress, near the collar. Just a few strands, but distinctive enough to trace to the Queen's chambers. Who has access to those chambers? Very few people. The Queen herself, her personal maid, 2 ladies in waiting, and the head of household staff. All of them were questioned. All have alibis. Which means, I put in, that either someone's lying about their alibi, or someone else got into the Queen's chambers without being seen. Talbot nodded miserably. It's a disaster. The press has gotten wind of the second death. By tomorrow, there will be speculation about royal involvement in murder. The monarchy could fall over this. Wolfe was silent for perhaps 30 seconds. Then tell me about the castle's security. Extensive. There are guards at all entrances, cameras in public areas, and a sophisticated alarm system. After Lord Edmund's death, security was increased further. Yet someone managed to kill Miss Martel and dispose of her body in the reflecting pool without being observed. Yes, which suggests either that the killer knows the security protocols intimately, or that the protocols have weaknesses. Inspector Devaux is adamant that his system is foolproof. Then he is a fool, Wolfe said flatly. No system is foolproof. Someone found the flaw and exploited it. He looked at the 2 letters on his desk, then at Talbot's earnest, worried face. Finally he sighed, a sound like a whale surfacing. Very well, I will come to Castle Belvoir, but I have conditions. I blinked. I'd expected more resistance, more grumbling, maybe another day of sulking. But Wolfe had decided, and once he decided, he moved forward with surprising speed. Her Majesty will agree to any reasonable terms, Talbot said quickly. First, I will bring Mr. Goodwin as my assistant. Second, Our travel arrangements will be first class and direct. Third, I will have complete access to all relevant personnel and locations. Fourth, I will have final say over the timing and manner of my investigation. And fifth, he paused, I will bring my dogs. Talbot's expression flickered. Your dogs? 6 of them. They are essential to my security and my peace of mind. I don't travel without them. I'll need to confirm with Her Majesty. Castle Belvoir has strict protocols about animals. Then change the protocols. Those are my terms. I'll communicate them immediately. Talbot stood, relief evident on his face. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Her Majesty will be grateful. When he'd gone, I looked at Wolfe. You're bringing the dogs to a castle? Of course. I don't trust castle security. Not after 2 murders in 3 days. Caesar and the others will provide security I can rely on. And the real reason? He almost smiled. I want to see the Queen's face when I inform her that 6 large dogs will be patrolling her marble halls. You realize this means traveling, right? You who won't even go to a restaurant without an hour of complaints? I am aware. And staying in a castle with royalty? And probably attending formal dinners where you'll have to wear a tie. Archie. Yes, sir. Make the arrangements. We leave as soon as possible. I grinned. This was going to be interesting. The next 48 hours were a controlled chaos that would have given a military logistics officer nightmares. Wolfe might have agreed to travel, but that didn't mean he was happy about it or willing to compromise on the essentials of his existence. Theodore must maintain the schedule precisely, he told his orchid nurse on Thursday morning. The oncidiums need daily misting, and the cattleyas are approaching bloom. Any deviation could be disastrous. Theodore, a lean whip of a man who'd been with Wolfe for 15 years, nodded patiently. I'll treat them like my own children, Mr. Wolfe. They're more delicate than children, and considerably more expensive. Meanwhile, I was on the phone with Saul Panzer, arranging for him to check on the brownstone daily while we were gone. Saul, the best operative in New York and possibly the world, took it in stride. I'll stop by morning and evening, he said in his soft, scratchy voice. Check the security system. Make sure Theodore hasn't burned the place down trying to cook for himself. Keep an eye on the street. You worried about something specific? 2 murders in 3 days at a castle with supposedly top-grade security. It makes you think. It makes you think someone inside the castle is involved. You want me to do some background checking? Everything you can find on the Montavian royal family, the castle staff, and a chef named Lénol Gaultier, also an Inspector de Vaux, who runs palace security. I'll have something for you before you leave. Fritz was handling the culinary crisis. Wolfe had insisted on bringing certain essentials, his favorite knives, specific spices, and enough ingredients to prepare at least one proper meal in case the castle's kitchen proved inadequate. But Mr. Wolfe, Fritz protested gently, the Queen's chef is Lionel Gaultier. He trained at Tai Levant. He is also accused of murder and likely unable to perform his duties, Wolfe countered. I will not suffer through medieval cuisine simply because European castles have delusions of culinary adequacy. The dogs were another matter entirely. Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Minerva, Diana, and Loyal had never been on a plane. Getting them cleared for international travel required veterinary certificates, vaccination records, import permits, and about 17 other documents that made the average tax return look simple. Dr. Vollmer, our physician who also handled the dog's medical needs, came by Thursday afternoon with a briefcase full of paperwork. Everything's in order, he said, scratching Caesar behind the ears. The big Doberman accepted the attention with regal tolerance. They're all healthy, fully vaccinated, and cleared for travel. But Nero, are you sure about this? It's a long flight, and they're not used to being confined. They'll adapt, and their presence is non-negotiable. What about the castle? Do they even allow dogs? They do now. Dr. Vollmer grinned. I'd pay money to see the Queen's face when you show up with this pack. Archie will no doubt provide a detailed description. I was at my desk, typing up notes on what we knew so far about the case. It wasn't much. Victim num 1, Lord Edmund Rothwell, age 53, career diplomata, Queen's cousin, second cousin, per Talbot, died from arsenic poisoning, administered in soup, prepared by Chef Gaultier, served in his private apartment. Death occurred 3 days ago, Monday evening. Victim 2, Lucia Martel, chambermaid at Castle Belvoir, testified seeing Gaultier near Lord Edmund's apartments with a vial, found dead Wednesday morning in reflecting pool, blunt force trauma to head, then drowning, gold embroidery thread from Queen's chambers found on body, primary suspect, Chef Lionel Gaultier, trained at tail event Paris, currently chef to Queen Theodora, alleged motive, Lord Edmund denied position to Gaultier's brother 15 years ago, brother later died in poverty, arsenic found in his quarters, letters detailing grudge also found, currently in custody, evidence problems, too neat, too convenient, per the Queen. Maid's death suggests either cover-up or attempt to silence witness. Witness, gold thread, implicate someone with access to Queen's private chambers. Questions. Who found the arsenic and letters in Gaultier's room? How long has Gaultier worked at the castle? What's the relationship between Lord Edmund and the Queen? Who else knew about the brothers' history? Why kill the maid after she'd already testified? How did killer access Queen's chambers? The last question was particularly interesting. If the gold thread was planted to implicate the Queen or someone close to her, it meant the killer had access to restricted areas. That suggested either palace staff, royal family, or someone with insider knowledge of the castle's layout and security. On Friday morning, Saul arrived with a thick folder of research. We gathered in the office, me, Wolfe and Saul, while the dogs arranged themselves around the room in their customary pattern. Caesar near Wolfe's desk, Mars by the door, Apollo at the window, Minerva in the shadows, Diana prowling, and Loyal at my feet. Interesting family, Saul began, settling into the red leather chair. The Montavian royal line goes back to 1247. Current Queen Theodora Adelina Marguerite ascended in 2003 after her father's death. She was 37 at the time, unmarried, still is. Heir apparent, Wolfe asked. Her nephew, Prince Leon Rothwell, 28 years old, son of the Queen's late brother. By all accounts charming but reckless. There have been rumors about gambling debts and unsuitable relationships. Lord Edmund, Prince Leon's father's cousin, made himself useful as a diplomat and foreign advisor, spent most of his career representing Montavian interests in various European capitals, came back to the castle 5 years ago when his health started failing. Heart condition, apparently. But the poison got him first. Family tensions? Hard to say. On the surface, everything looks cordial, but there's money involved. Always a great motivator for murder. Lord Edmund was wealthy in his own right, inherited from his mother's side, no children, so his estate would go to his closest relatives, the Queen or Prince Leon, who benefits most from his death. In cash terms, Prince Leon, but politically, the Queen might benefit too. Lord Edmund was conservative, opposed to modernizing the monarchy. He and the Queen clashed over whether to open more of the castle to tourists, whether to reduce royal expenditures. Nothing violent, but philosophical differences. The chef, Gaultier? Saul flipped pages. Born in Lyon, trained in Paris, worked his way up through several three-star restaurants, came to Castle Belvoir 6 years ago. By all accounts brilliant, temperamental, but that's standard for chefs at his level. The brother, Henri Gaultier, was a sous chef who applied for a position at the castle 15 years ago. Lord Edmund was on the selection committee and voted against him. Henri never got another prestigious position and died 3 years later. Liver failure, likely from alcoholism. Did Lionel Gaultier blame Lord Edmund? That's where it gets murky. There's no record of any public statements or confrontations. The letters supposedly found in his room are the first indication that he held a grudge, which is suspicious in itself. Why keep incriminating letters for 15 years? Indeed, Wolfe murmured. What about Inspector Devant? Career security man, former military, served in the French Foreign Legion before taking a position with Montavian Palace Security 10 years ago. Rose to head of security 5 years ago. Reputation for being thorough, maybe a bit rigid. Not known for imagination or flexibility, which could make him easy to fool, I said. If the evidence is planted well enough, or, Saul countered, he could be part of the setup. Someone in his position would know exactly how to make evidence look convincing. Wolfe nodded slowly. What about the maid, Lucia Martel? 24 years old, worked at the castle for 3 years, came from a village about 20 kilometers away, no criminal record, no known connections to Lord Edmund or Chef Gaultier. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place if someone wanted a convenient witness. Her family? Parents and 2 younger sisters. Father's a carpenter. Mother works in a bakery. They're devastated. Wolfe closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were hard. Someone is being quite clever. 2 murders that initially appear unconnected. One implicating the chef, one implicating the queen or her household. But the connection is the maid herself. She's both witness and victim. Suggesting, I asked, that we are dealing with someone who planned several moves ahead. Someone who understood that the maid's testimony would be essential to convicting Gaultier, but also so that she represented a vulnerability, a witness who might recant or reveal manipulation. So kill her and make it look like the Queen's involved. Or make it look like Gaultier killed her to silence her, using the Queen's chambers as an opportunity. Either way, the chaos serves the killer's purpose. Which is? That, Wolfe said, is what we must discover. We left Saturday morning. The castle had arranged for a private charter, a small jet configured for comfort rather than capacity. The dogs handled it better than expected, though Mars growled at the engines during takeoff, and Diana spent the first hour pacing the cabin until exhaustion won. Wolfe, strapped into a reinforced seat, spent the flight reading and ignoring the world outside the windows. I alternated between reviewing Saul's notes and watching the Atlantic slide by 30,000 feet below. You realize, I said at one point, that we're flying into a situation where 2 people are already dead. The primary suspect is in custody, and everyone with means and motive is living in close quarters in an isolated castle. Your point? Just that it's either going to be the easiest case you've ever solved or the most dangerous. It will be neither. It will be complicated, frustrating, and resolved through logic rather than danger. Murder investigations are intellectual exercises, not adventures. Tell that to the last 3 corpses we've dealt with. He gave me a look that suggested further commentary would be unwelcome, so I went back to the notes. The plane droned on. We landed in Zurich just after sunset local time, transferred to a helicopter. Wolfe's expression during this transition was worth photographing, and flew another hour into the Alps. The castle appeared below us like something from a fantasy novel, all white stone and peaked towers, perched on a mountain ledge with forests spreading in every direction. Pretty, I said. Wolfe grunted. We landed on a pad just outside the main walls. As the rotors wound down, figures emerged from a columned entrance, an official welcoming party, complete with what I assumed was palace staff in formal livery. At the center was a woman in her late 50s, wearing a simple but elegant dress in royal blue. Her hair was swept back, her posture perfect, her expression composed. She waited while we disembarked, showing no reaction to the sight of 6 large dogs emerging behind us. When we reached her, she extended her hand to Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe, I am Theodora. Welcome to Castle Belvoir. Wolfe, who'd been prepared to dislike everything about this trip, actually bowed slightly. Your Majesty, thank you for your hospitality. I understand you have conditions regarding your stay? Several, none of which should prove overly burdensome. Good. Then let us go inside. I imagine you and your companions are tired from your journey. She turned, and we followed her through the entrance into a marble corridor that would have made Grand Central Terminal look modest. Chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, tapestries lined the walls, and our footsteps echoed on floors polished to a mirror shine. The dogs fanned out automatically, taking in this new territory with professional assessment. Caesar stayed close to Wolfe, but the others ranged ahead and behind, ears forward, eyes moving. A man in his 60s, wearing what I guessed was a major domo's formal attire, appeared at the Queen's side. This is Bertrand, my chamberlain, the Queen said. He will see to your accommodations and any needs you might have. Your Majesty, Bertrand said smoothly, though his eyes kept flicking to the dogs. I've prepared the East Wing suite as requested. It includes a sitting room, 2 bedrooms, private bath, and a small adjoining room that can serve as quarters for the animals. They'll sleep in our rooms, Wolfe said. They're guards, not pets. Of course, sir. We climbed a grand staircase, turned down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and finally reached a set of double doors. Bertrand opened them to reveal rooms that managed to be both luxurious and comfortable, high ceilings, period furniture, but also modern amenities, and critically, space for Wolfe to move without feeling confined. "Dinner is served at 8, the Queen said from the doorway. "Formal dress. I hope that's acceptable?" "I brought ties," I said, under protest, but I brought them. She almost smiled. "Good. We'll discuss the investigation tomorrow. Tonight I thought we might simply dine and allow you to settle in. Inspector Devaux is eager to brief you, but that can wait until you're rested." "I would prefer to begin immediately," Wolfe said. "Mr. Wolfe, you've just traveled several thousand miles with 6 dogs. Surely one evening—" "Your Majesty, 2 people are dead. Every hour of delay increases the risk that evidence will be lost, witnesses' memories will fade, or the killer will have time to further obscure the trail. I would rather begin now." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Bertrand will summon Inspector Devaux. Dinner will be delayed until 9. Will that suffice?" "It will, thank you." When she'd gone, I looked around the suite. Fritz would have approved. The rooms were well proportioned, the furnishings solid without being ostentatious. The windows overlooked the mountains, now dark against a star-filled sky. The dogs were already exploring, checking corners and sniffing for threats. Caesar had claimed a position near the main door. Mars was examining the windows. Loyal had discovered the bathroom, and apparently decided the marble floor was acceptably cool for resting. "Not bad for a castle," I said. Wolfe was settling into an armchair that looked almost adequate for his bulk. "It will do. Now where is that inspector?" Inspector Devaux arrived 20 minutes later. He was exactly what I'd expected from Saul's description. Mid-50s, military bearing, with the kind of face that suggested he'd stopped smiling around the same time he'd left the Legion. He wore a dark uniform with enough insignia to stock a haberdashery, and his handshake was the grip of someone testing for weakness. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin." He had an accent, French overlaid with something harder. "Her Majesty says you wish to begin immediately." "I do. Sit down, Inspector. Tell me everything." Devaux took the chair. I indicated, though he sat on its edge rather than relaxing. Mars had positioned himself behind the chair, close enough that Devaux could undoubtedly feel the dog's breath. "Perhaps your animal could give me more space." "He could. He won't. Tell me about Lord Edmund's death." Devaux's jaw tightened, but he started talking. Lord Edmund maintained apartments in the castle's north wing, 3 rooms, private entrance, his own staff. He dined alone most evenings, working while he ate. Monday evening he requested soup from the kitchen. Chef Gaultier prepared it personally, a consommé with vegetables and herbs. The soup was delivered at 7 p.m. by a kitchen assistant, left on Lord Edmund's desk. Who was the assistant? Pierre Dubois, age 26. He's worked in the kitchen for 4 years. No connection to Lord Edmund, beyond delivering his meals occasionally. Continue. Lord Edmund consumed the soup while reading diplomatic correspondence. Around 7:45, he began feeling ill. By 8 he was vomiting violently. His valet, Marcus Fenwick, found him collapsed and called for help. The castle physician, Dr. Bergstrom, attended immediately but could do little. Lord Edmund died at 10:17 p.m. The poison was identified as arsenic. Arsenic trioxide, mixed into the soup in a concentration sufficient to cause death within hours. The laboratory analysis was unambiguous. When was the soup tested? The next morning, we preserved the taurine. Lord Edmund had consumed only about half the portion. Who suggested testing for poison? Devaux's expression flickered. I did. The symptoms, violent gastrointestinal distress, convulsions, suggested poisoning rather than natural illness. And Gaultier became a suspect because? He prepared the soup personally. He has had a motive, and when we searched his quarters, we found the poison and the letters. Describe the search. Conducted Tuesday morning with 2 witnesses present, Bertrand the Chamberlain and Captain Roux of the Palace Guard. We found a bottle of arsenic trioxide in a locked drawer of Gaultier's desk, along with a folder containing letters written by his late brother, Henri. The letters detailed Henri's resentment of Lord Edmund and blamed him for Henri's failure to achieve his dreams. Were the letters addressed to Gaultier? They were Henri's personal correspondence, kept by Lionel after Henri's death. Had Gaultier ever mentioned his brother's resentment? Not to anyone we've interviewed. He kept it private, which suggests he was nursing the grudge. Or, I said, that he didn't have a grudge and someone planted the letters. Devoe's eyes went cold. The evidence is clear. Gaultier had means, motive and opportunity. The only question was whether he acted alone or with assistance. And then Lucia Martel died, Wolfe said. Yes, Wednesday morning, discovered by the groundskeeper at 6:15 a.m. She'd been struck on the head with a heavy object, likely one of the decorative stones from the reflecting pool's border, then left in the water. She'd been dead for several hours. Why was she killed? Presumably to silence her. She'd testified about seeing Gaultier near Lord Edmund's apartments with a vial. If she recanted or revealed something that undermined the case against him, it would complicate the prosecution. But she'd already testified. Her statement was recorded. Yes, but a living witness is more compelling than a written statement. And if she had second thoughts, or if she'd been pressured to lie. Wolfe leaned forward. You think she was pressured? I think it's possible. She was young, impressionable. Someone could have convinced her to implicate Gaultier falsely, and then killed her to prevent her from revealing the manipulation. It's a theory. What about the gold thread found on her body? Devoe's face hardened. That is problematic. The thread matches embroidery from Her Majesty's private chambers. It suggests either that the Queen is involved, which is absurd, or that someone with access to those chambers is responsible. Who has such access? Very few people. The Queen herself, her personal maid Claudette Rousseau, 2 ladies-in-waiting, Lady Isabel Frontenac and Countess Sophie Richter, and Bertrand, as head of household. All of them have been questioned? Extensively. All have alibis for the time of Lucia's death. Which were? Devoe consulted a notebook. Her Majesty was in her chambers until 11 p.m., then retired. Claudette was with her until she dismissed her at 10:04. Lady Isabel was in the castle library until 11, verified by the night librarian. Countess Sophie was in her rooms, ill with a headache. Her maid confirms this. Bertrand was conducting his nightly rounds of the public areas until midnight, verified by multiple staff members. And yet someone accessed the Queen's chambers to obtain the thread. Yes. Which means either someone is lying about their alibi, or someone else knows how to enter restricted areas without being detected. I prefer the first explanation. Naturally, it requires less imagination. Wolfe shifted his bulk. Tell me about the castle's security. Devoe's spine straightened, professional pride engaged. The castle has been secured according to modern standards. All exterior entrances are monitored by cameras and guards. Interior public areas are also covered. Private areas, including the royal chambers, have electronic locks with keycard access. A log records every entry and exit. Has this log been checked? Of course, no unauthorized access to the Queen's chambers is recorded. Then the access was authorized. Someone with a legitimate keycard entered, took the thread, and left. Which implicates the 5 people I mentioned. Or someone who managed to acquire a duplicate keycard. Devoe's expression suggested he found this unlikely. The keycards are encrypted and individually coded. Duplication would require sophisticated equipment and access to the security system itself. So either an insider or someone with professional skills, I said. Yes. Wolfe closed his eyes. Caesar, sensing his master's concentration, settled onto the floor beside the chair. Inspector, do you believe Chef Gaultier is guilty? The evidence. I'm not asking about evidence. I'm asking what you believe. Long pause. Then, I believe someone wanted Lord Edmund dead and chose to implicate Gaultier. Whether Gaultier was involved willingly or unwillingly, I'm less certain, but someone orchestrated this carefully. And Lucia Martel. She became dangerous to the plan, so she was eliminated. But if the plan was to frame Gaultier, why create additional complexity by implicating the Queen's household? I don't know. Perhaps to create confusion, to cast suspicion away from the true killer. Or, Wolfe said, to cast suspicion towards someone specific, someone who would be implicated by evidence from the Queen's chambers. Devoe stood. I'll provide you with full access to all evidence, witness statements and locations. Tomorrow morning, I'll arrange for you to inspect Lord Edmund's apartments and the reflecting pool. For now, you should rest. One more question. Where is Chef Gaultier being held? In the castle's security wing, it's more comfortable than a prison, but equally secure. I want to speak with him, tomorrow, first thing. I'll arrange it. When he'd gone, I looked at Wolfe. You believe Gaultier is innocent? I believe the evidence is too convenient, the timing too precise. Someone has gone to considerable trouble to create a narrative. Our task is to determine what actually happened beneath that narrative. And we start with Gaultier. We start by understanding why he was chosen as the scapegoat. Once we know that, we'll understand who benefits from his destruction. There was a knock on the door. Bertrand appeared, imperturbable despite Caesar's immediate attention. Gentlemen, dinner is served. Her Majesty awaits you in the private dining room. Wolfe rose with a sigh. Come, Archie, let us see if this castle can feed us properly. The dogs. Caesar and Loyal will come. The others will guard the rooms. We followed Bertrand through corridors that belonged in a museum, down a smaller staircase, and into a room that managed to be intimate despite its elegant proportions. A table was set for 4, crystal gleaming in candlelight. The Queen was already seated, along with a young man I didn't recognize, late 20s, handsome in that aristocratic way that suggests good genes and better tailoring. He stood as we entered. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, may I present my nephew, Prince Leon Rothwell. The prince's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. A pleasure. Aunt Theodora speaks highly of you. Your Highness, Wolfe said, settling into the reinforced chair that had been thoughtfully provided. Dinner was extraordinary. If the Queen noticed Caesar and Loyal positioning themselves behind Wolfe's chair, she gave no sign. Instead, she guided the conversation with practiced ease, asking about our journey, our first impressions of the castle, even inquiring about the orchids Wolfe had left in Theodore's care. Prince Leon was charming, witty, and slightly nervous, the kind of nervous that comes from being in the presence of a man who might uncover things you'd prefer, stayed buried. He asked intelligent questions about Wolfe's previous cases, laughed at my stories about the brownstone's history, and generally played the role of gracious host. But I noticed things, the way his eyes kept flicking to his aunt, the way he drank his wine, just a little too quickly, the way his hands occasionally clenched on the table. Halfway through the main course, a perfectly prepared duck that made Fritz's best efforts look amateur, the Queen set down her fork. Mr. Wolfe, I want you to understand something. I don't care about politics or scandal or what Parliament thinks. I care about the truth. If Chef Gaultier is guilty, I want that proven beyond doubt. If he's innocent, I want him freed and the real killer found. Can you give me that? If the truth can be found, I will find it. That's not a guarantee. No, it's a statement of intent. I don't deal in guarantees, Your Majesty. I deal in facts, logic, and dogged persistence. If those are insufficient for your needs, you've hired the wrong detective. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. No, Mr. Wolfe, I think you're exactly the right detective, which is why I'm going to tell you something no one else knows. Prince Leon's wineglass froze halfway to his lips. Lord Edmund was planning to leave Montavia, the Queen continued. He'd accepted a position with the European Commission in Brussels. He was going to announce it next week. Only 5 people knew: Edmund himself, me, my private secretary, the foreign minister, and Leon. I felt the room's temperature drop about 10 degrees. Why is this relevant? Wolfe asked. Because Edmund controlled a trust fund established by his mother. Upon his death, that fund, worth approximately 40 million euros, would be divided equally between Leon and me. But if he'd lived and moved to Brussels, he would have dissolved the trust and donated most of it to a charitable foundation he'd been planning. She looked at her nephew. Leon had gone very pale. So you see, Mr. Wolfe, several people had excellent financial motives for wanting Edmund dead before he could leave Montavia, and I thought you should know that from the beginning. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of Caesar's breathing and the crackle of fire in the hearth. Thank you for your candor, Wolfe said finally. It will make my investigation considerably more focused. Good. Now shall we discuss dessert? I understand our pastry chef has prepared something special. Dinner continued, but the ease had gone out of it. Prince Leon made excuses and left early. The Queen retired shortly after. Wolfe and I returned to our rooms with Caesar and Loyal padding silently behind us. Well, I said, when we were alone, that was illuminating. Indeed. The Queen is a remarkable woman. She just handed me a suspect list that includes her own nephew. You think Prince Leon killed Lord Edmund for the money? I think money is an excellent motive. I also think the timing is suspicious. Edmund announces his plans to a very small group, and days later he's dead. But I don't think anything yet. We need more information. Starting with Gaultier tomorrow? Starting with Gaultier, and then we'll see what other secrets this castle is hiding. He settled into the armchair with a book. The dogs arranged themselves around the room, and I sat at the small desk, typing notes on my laptop, trying to make sense of a case that was getting more complicated by the hour. Sunday morning dawned cold and clear, the mountains visible through bulletproof glass that the castle's staff had installed in our windows overnight at Duval's insistence. Apparently our security concerns had made an impression. Fritz would have approved of breakfast. It arrived on silver trays at precisely 8 a.m., wheeled in by a young woman who carefully avoided eye contact with Minerva and Diana, both of whom had spent the night patrolling the corridors and looked like they'd enjoyed the exercise. Fresh pastries, perfectly brewed coffee, smoked fish, eggs prepared 3 ways, fruit that was probably worth its weight in gold, and a small card from the Queen. The kitchen staff wishes to demonstrate that we value good food, even in difficult times. Acceptable, Wolfe pronounced after sampling the eggs. High praise from a man who considered Fritz the finest chef in existence. At 9 o'clock, Inspector Duval appeared to escort us to the security wing. We took all 6 dogs, Wolfe insisted, and after a brief argument about protocol and propriety, Duval surrendered. The security wing was in the castle's oldest section, built into the mountainside itself. The corridors were narrower here, the ceilings lower, the walls thick stone rather than decorated plaster. It felt less like a castle and more like a fortress. Gaultier's cell was surprisingly comfortable, more like a hotel room than a prison. There was a proper bed, a desk, bookshelves, even a small window barred but with a view. The chef himself was sitting at the desk, writing in a notebook. He looked up as we entered, and I saw a man in his 50s, with the kind of face that suggested passion habitually restrained. Strong features, deep-set eyes, a mouth that could be either stern or kind, depending on his mood. He stood. "You are the detective from America, Monsieur Wolfe?" "I am. This is my assistant, Archie Goodwin." "Inspector Duval, you know. We'd like to speak with you about Lord Edmund's death." Gaultier's laugh was bitter. "I am accused of poisoning him. What else is there to discuss?" "Everything, starting with whether you did it." "I did not." "Good. Then sit down and tell me what actually happened." Duval started to object, something about proper procedure, but Wolfe's glare silenced him. We arranged ourselves, Wolfe in the cell's single armchair, me at the desk with my notebook, Duval near the door. The dogs distributed themselves in their usual pattern, though Caesar stayed close to Wolfe, sensing this was important. "Monday evening," Wolfe began. "Lord Edmund requested soup for dinner. Describe the preparation." Gaultier settled onto the edge of his bed. It was not unusual. Lord Edmund often ate alone when working late. He preferred simple meals, good ingredients, classic preparation, nothing elaborate. That evening, he requested consommé with vegetables. "You prepared it personally?" "Yes, I prepare all meals for the royal family and senior household members personally. It is my responsibility and my privilege." "Walk me through the process. Everything." Gaultier closed his eyes, remembering. "I began at 5:30 p.m. The consommé was already prepared. I'd made it that morning as part of the day's preparation. It was in the refrigerator, perfectly clear, properly seasoned. I reheated it gently, added julienne vegetables that I cut myself, carrots, celery, leeks. I tasted it. It was perfect. I ladled it into the serving tureen, covered it, and placed it on a tray with bread and butter." "Where was the tureen during this process?" "On the main preparation counter, in clear view of the kitchen staff." "How many staff were present?" "6, including myself, Pierre Dubois, who delivered the meal, Marie Blanchard, my sous-chef, 2 prep cooks, Henri Leclerc and Sophie Martin, and André Fontaine, the pastry chef, though he was in his separate area." "So 5 people watched you prepare the soup." "They were working on their own tasks. But yes, anyone could have seen me." "Could anyone have added something to the true mean without being observed?" Long pause. It is possible. The kitchen is large, busy. I cannot watch everyone constantly. But you tasted the soup before serving it. Yes, it was perfect. Then either the poison was added after you tasted it, or you're lying about tasting it. Gautier's face flushed. I tasted it. I always taste every dish before it leaves my kitchen. Then someone poisoned it afterward. When did Pierre collect the tray? Approximately 6:45. I prepared it at 6:30, covered it, placed it in the service corridor. Pierre picked it up 15 minutes later. Why the delay? Pierre was finishing another task. It is normal. Who had access to the service corridor during those 15 minutes? Anyone in the kitchen staff. It's not restricted. So someone could have lifted the cover, added poison, replaced the cover, and left without being noticed. I suppose so, but why would they? And who would do such a thing? Those are precisely the questions we're investigating. Wolfe shifted his bulk. Now, this business about your brother. Tell me about Henri. Gautier's expression closed like a door slamming. Henri has nothing to do with this. He has everything to do with this. The police found letters in your quarters describing his resentment of Lord Edmund. They found those letters next to a bottle of arsenic. Don't you find that convenient? I find it outrageous. I did not own arsenic, and I did not keep letters detailing grudges against Lord Edmund. But your brother did have such a grudge. Silence. Then quietly, yes. Henri blamed Lord Edmund for ruining his career. It was not rational. Lord Edmund simply voted against Henri's application to work here, as was his right. But Henri needed someone to blame for his failures. I tried to tell him that his problems were his own, that drinking himself to death in cheap apartments was not Lord Edmund's fault, but he wouldn't listen. Did you share his resentment? No. I was disappointed when Henri died, angry at the waste of his talent and his life. But I blamed Henri's choices, not Lord Edmund. Yet letters were found suggesting otherwise. Then someone planted them. I kept nothing of Henri's except a photograph and his chef's knife. Everything else I threw away or gave to his landlord when I cleared his rooms after his death. There were no letters about grudges, no documentation of blame. I wanted to forget that Henri had destroyed himself and move forward with my own life. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. Mr. Gaultier, someone went to considerable trouble to frame you for murder. This suggests either that you were a convenient target, or that someone specifically wanted you discredited. Which is it? I don't know. I have enemies. Every chef at my level has competitors, people who resent success, but none who would commit murder to destroy me. What about within the castle? Any tensions with other staff members? Gaultier hesitated. There are always tensions. Bertrand, the chamberlain, believes I am too demanding, too protective of my kitchen's autonomy. Inspector DeVoe thinks I'm arrogant because I refuse to let security personnel wander through my food preparation areas without proper hygiene protocols. Lady Isabel, one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, once complained that I refused to prepare a dish exactly as she wanted. I told her I serve the Queen's preferences, not hers. Minor irritations. Yes, nothing that would inspire this. What about Lord Edmund himself? Any interactions with him? Very few. He dined with the Queen occasionally, attended formal dinners, but we rarely spoke directly. He was courteous when we did speak, complimentary about my cooking. There was no tension between us. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. Caesar shifted beside him, and Loyal, who'd been lying near the cell's small window, suddenly raised his head, ears forward. Something had caught his attention. The chambermaid, Lucia Martel, Wolfe said. Did you know her? By sight. Not personally. She was one of many staff members. We may have exchanged greetings in passing, but nothing more. Yet she claimed to see you near Lord Edmund's apartments, carrying a vial, 20 minutes before the soup was delivered. She lied, or she was mistaken, or someone paid her to lie. I was in the kitchen all evening, with witnesses. Inspector, Wolfe glanced at DeVoe. Have those witnesses been interviewed? Yes. The kitchen staff confirms Gaultier was present, but they also say he stepped out twice, once to check on supplies in the storage area, once to speak with a wine steward. Either absence could have been long enough to visit Lord Edmund's apartments. Gaultier stood, agitated. I checked on supplies. Yes, it took perhaps 5 minutes. I spoke with Henri. Not my brother, a different Henri. Henri Berthollet, the head wine steward, about pairing wines for an upcoming dinner. That conversation lasted perhaps 10 minutes. Neither activity took me anywhere near Lord Edmund's wing. Can Berthollet confirm this? Yes, I've told the inspector this repeatedly, but he seems uninterested in witnesses who support my innocence. Devore's face hardened. I interviewed Berthollet. He confirms the conversation, but cannot confirm the exact timing. You could have spoken with him, gone to Lord Edmund's apartments, returned, and still been back in the kitchen when the soup was prepared. But I didn't. Wolfe held up a hand. Gentlemen, shouting reveals passion, not truth. Mr. Gaultier, describe the vial Miss Martel claimed to see. I can't. I never carried one. Never saw one. Inspector, what happened to this vial? Never found. Presumably Gaultier disposed of it after adding the poison to the soup. How convenient. An invisible vial seen only by a dead witness, and which vanished without trace. Wolfe heaved himself to his feet. Mr. Gaultier, you will remain patient. I intend to prove your innocence, but that requires time and information. Cooperate with Inspector Devaux, contain your temper, and trust that justice, while slow, is thorough. Justice? Gaultier's laugh was harsh. I am imprisoned for a crime I didn't commit, accused by a dead woman, condemned by evidence that appeared magically in my quarters. Where is justice in that? Not here yet. But it will be. Come, Archie, we have much to do. Outside the cell, I asked the obvious question. You believe him? I believe he is telling his version of the truth. Whether that version aligns with objective reality remains to be determined. What about the wine steward Berthollet? Should we talk to him? Eventually. First, I want to see Lord Edmund's apartments and the reflecting pool. Context before details, Archie. Always context before details. Devaux led us through more corridors, up a different staircase, and finally into the north wing, the older, quieter part of the castle where senior household members and royal family maintained private apartments. Lord Edmund's rooms were being preserved as a crime scene, Devaux explained. Nothing had been touched since the body was removed and the initial investigation completed. Yellow tape sealed the doors and a guard stood watch. Your Majesty has authorized you full access, Devaux said, breaking the seals, but please disturb nothing. The apartments were exactly what I'd expected from a career diplomat. Comfortable, traditional, carefully neutral, a sitting room with bookcases and leather furniture, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed and thick carpets, a small study where Lord Edmund had apparently done most of his work. Wolfe examined everything with minute attention. The desk where the soup had been served, now clear except for some document folders, the chair where Lord Edmund had sat, the carpet beneath, professionally cleaned but still showing faint stains. The tureen? Wolfe asked. Evidence locker. I can arrange for you to examine it. Later, first show me the route from the kitchen to these apartments. We retraced the path, service corridors, narrow staircases designed for staff rather than guests, connecting passages that allowed the castle's machinery to function invisibly. It took perhaps 10 minutes to walk from the kitchen to Lord Edmund's door, longer if carrying a heavy tray. And the chambermaid Miss Martel claims she saw Gaultier here. Wolfe gestured to the corridor outside Lord Edmund's apartments. Yes, she was delivering linens to rooms 3 doors down. She saw a man she identified as Gaultier emerging from the service staircase, walking quickly toward this area, carrying what appeared to be a small vial. Did she speak to him? No. She said he didn't notice her. She was in a linen closet, door partially open. How convenient that she was positioned to observe without being observed. Convenient for the investigation, certainly. Or convenient for someone who wanted a witness in the right place at the right time. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, thoughts? I looked around. The corridor was dim, lit by sconces rather than overhead lights. If I wanted to frame someone, this would be perfect. Dim lighting, confused identification possible, witness with clear view but limited ability to see details. Precisely. Miss Martel could have seen someone she thought was Gaultier, or been told to claim she'd seen him, or seen someone deliberately disguised to resemble him. Or, Devaux said coldly, she saw exactly what she reported. Chef Gaultier, where he shouldn't have been, carrying poison. Then why kill her? Because she represented a vulnerability to his defense. If she recanted, or if questioning revealed inconsistencies in her testimony, it could create reasonable doubt. Wolfe shook his head. You give Gaultier too much credit and the killer too little. If Gaultier were guilty and capable of murder, he would have killed Miss Martell before she testified, not after. Killing her after serves no purpose except to draw attention and suspicion. Unless he panicked. Chef Gaultier does not strike me as a man who panics. He is passionate but controlled, emotional but disciplined. He might commit murder in hot blood, driven by rage or desperation. But this methodical poisoning, this careful framing, this cold-blooded silencing of a witness, this is not his style. We moved on to the reflecting pool. It was in the castle's east gardens, a formal space surrounded by hedges and classical statuary. The pool itself was perhaps 30 feet across, shallow except for a deeper section at the center, lined with decorative stones. Miss Martell was found floating there. Deveau pointed to the center. Face down, arms outstretched. The blow to her head had rendered her unconscious but not killed her immediately. She drowned while unconscious. Time of death? Medical examiner estimates between midnight and 3 a.m. Wednesday. She finished her shift at 10 p.m., was seen leaving the staff quarters around 10:30. Presumably she met her killer between her quarters and here. Why would she come to the gardens at night? Unknown. Perhaps she was meeting someone. Perhaps she enjoyed walking before sleep. The gardens are open to staff. Wolfe circled the pool slowly, Caesar and Mars flanking him, while the other dogs spread out to examine the area. Where was the stone used as a weapon? Here. Deveau indicated a spot near the pool's edge, marked with a small flag. We recovered it with blood and hair matching Miss Martell. Fingerprints? None. Either the killer wore gloves, or the stone's rough surface didn't retain prints. And the gold thread? Found on her dress, near the collar. 3 strands, approximately 2 inches in length each. Laboratory analysis confirms they match embroidery from the Queen's chambers. Wolfe knelt carefully, given his bulk, and examined the flag spot. The stone weighs how much? Approximately 8 pounds. So the killer required strength enough to wield it effectively. That suggests a man, or a very strong woman, or someone motivated enough that adrenaline provided the necessary force. Wolfe straightened. Show me the Queen's chambers. If the Queen was surprised by Wolfe's request to tour her private rooms, she gave no sign. She met us at the entrance to her apartments, dressed casually in slacks and a simple blouse, and guided us through rooms that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. These are my spaces, she said. I retreat here when ceremony becomes too much, or when I simply need privacy. Very few people are allowed entry. The sitting room contained the embroidered pillows Deveau had mentioned. Beautiful work, gold thread forming intricate patterns of alpine flowers against cream fabric. Wolfe examined them carefully, then asked to see where they were stored. In that chest, the Queen indicated a carved wooden box near the window. Claudette, my maid, maintains them. They're quite old, made by my great-grandmother, and require careful handling. Who could access this chest without arousing suspicion? Claudette, certainly. The ladies in waiting, if they needed to check on the rooms in my absence. Bertrand, as he manages all household maintenance. Possibly the chambermaid assigned to clean these rooms, though she wouldn't normally handle the pillows. Was that chambermaid Lucia Martell? The Queen's face grew still. No. Lucia worked in the family apartments and guest quarters. These rooms are cleaned by Rose Pelletier, who's been with me for 20 years. So Miss Martell would have had no legitimate reason to be in your chambers. None. Yet threads from your pillows were found on her body. Yes. The Queen moved to the window, looking out over the mountains. Someone wants to implicate me, Mr. Wolfe, or at least wants to create scandal surrounding the throne. The question is why. The answer may lie in who benefits from such scandal. Your Majesty, you mentioned last night that Lord Edmund was planning to leave Montavia. Who else might profit from his death? She turned. Besides Leon and myself, you mean? Edmund's estate includes properties in 3 countries, investments worth millions, and that trust fund. His will divides everything between Leon and me, with some minor bequests to charities. But the trust fund was the truly significant asset, 40 million euros. With Edmund alive and moving to Brussels, that money would have gone to his foundation. With him dead, Leon and I each received 20 million. Does Prince Leon need money? Leon always needs money. He gambles, invests poorly, maintains an expensive lifestyle. I've bailed him out twice. A third time would require difficult questions about his fitness as heir. Would he kill his cousin for 20 million euros? I don't want to believe so. But people do terrible things for money, Mr. Wolfe. Even princes. What about others in the household? Bertrand, the ladies in waiting, senior staff. Bertrand is comfortably compensated and has been offered positions elsewhere. He stays out of loyalty, not necessity. Lady Isabel has family money. Countess Sophie married wealth. Chef Gaultier is extremely well paid. I can't think of anyone whose financial situation would motivate murder. Then perhaps money isn't the motive. What else drives people to kill? Love, fear, revenge, pride, shame, the usual catalogue of human passion. Someone killed Lord Edmund and framed Chef Gaultier. That required planning, access, and a willingness to destroy an innocent man. Such a person is driven by more than mere greed. The Queen studied him. You'll find them? I will, but Your Majesty should prepare herself for an unpleasant truth. The killer is almost certainly someone you know, someone close to the royal household, someone you may trust or even care for. I know. Her voice was quiet. That's what makes this so terrible. Back in our suite, Wolfe arranged himself in the armchair and closed his eyes. The dogs had returned from their afternoon patrol and were settling into their various positions. I recognized the signs. He was thinking, assembling pieces, looking for patterns. I gave him an hour. Then, okay, what have we got? His eyes opened. We have a carefully constructed frame designed to implicate two separate parties, Chef Gaultier for the murder and someone connected to the Queen for silencing the witness. This suggests either remarkable incompetence, multiple killers working at cross purposes, or remarkable cleverness, one killer creating confusion by implicating multiple targets. You think it's one killer? I think Occam's razor favors the simpler explanation. One person, one plan, multiple layers of misdirection. So who? That is the question. Consider the requirements: access to the kitchen, knowledge of Gaultier's history, ability to plant evidence in his quarters, access to Lord Edmund's apartments, means to ensure Miss Martell would be in the right place to witness the supposed poisoning, access to the Queen's chambers to obtain the thread, and sufficient strength or determination to kill Miss Martell. That's a long list. Yes, which narrows our suspects considerably. It must be someone with broad access to the castle, intimate knowledge of its layout and routines, and the authority or skill to move through restricted areas without suspicion. Bertrand? Possible. As Chamberlain, he has access to everything. But what's his motive? Devant? Also possible, and with even broader access. But again, motive escapes me. One of the royal family? The Queen we can eliminate. She hired us. Prince Leon has financial motive, but would need to be remarkably foolish to kill his cousin days after learning about the Brussels move. Who else? The ladies in waiting? The wine steward? The kitchen staff? All worth investigating. Archie, I want you to interview the staff. Begin with those who had access to both the kitchen and Lord Edmund's apartments. Pay particular attention to anyone who seems nervous, overly helpful, or too eager to point suspicion elsewhere. What will you be doing? Thinking, and perhaps sampling more of the castle's wine cellar. Fritz would want me to ensure it's properly managed. I didn't bother pointing out that wine cellars weren't exactly critical to the investigation. When Wolfe wanted to think, he often did it while drinking beer or wine, claiming the alcohol freed his mind from conventional paths. Who was I to argue with success? Over the next 2 days, I conducted interviews that would have exhausted a marathon runner. The castle staff numbered over 100, but I focused on those with relevant access or knowledge. Henri Berthollet, the wine steward, confirmed his conversation with Gaultier about wine pairings, but couldn't specify the exact time. Perhaps 6:15, perhaps 6:30. I was in the cellar, checking inventory. Chef Gaultier came down. We discussed options for the upcoming state dinner. He left. 10 minutes, no more. Marie Blanchard, the sous chef, described the kitchen's routines with professional precision. We prepare meals for approximately 30 people on a typical evening. The royal family, senior household staff, anyone dining at the castle. Chef Gaultier oversees everything, but we each have our stations. I was working on the roasted chicken that evening. hardly watching what Chef was doing with Lord Edmund's soup. Could someone have tampered with it? I suppose so, but I saw nothing suspicious. Pierre Dubois, the kitchen assistant who delivered the fatal meal, was 26 and clearly terrified. I just carried the tray. I didn't touch the soup, didn't lift the cover, didn't do anything except transport it from the service corridor to Lord Edmund's apartments. The tureen was covered when I picked it up, covered when I delivered it. I knocked, was told to enter, placed the tray on Lord Edmund's desk, left. 5 minutes, total. Lady Isabel Frontenac, one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, was elegant, composed, and clearly resentful of being questioned. I spent that evening in the library, researching genealogy for a project Her Majesty assigned me. The night librarian, Mr. Foster, was present the entire time. I left around 11, went directly to my rooms, saw no one, heard nothing. As for the gold thread, I have no idea how it ended up on that poor girl's body. Perhaps someone is trying to implicate the Queen's household generally, not me specifically. Countess Sophie Richter, the other lady-in-waiting, was younger, friendlier, and dealing with a persistent headache. I've had migraines all week. The altitude, I think. That night was particularly bad. I took medication and retired early. My maid Jessica brought me tea around 10 o'clock and can confirm I was in no condition to go wandering the castle murdering chambermaids. Claudette Rousseau, the Queen's personal maid, was 50-ish, protective, and clearly devoted to her mistress. I've served Her Majesty for 30 years. The suggestion that anyone in her household would commit murder is absurd. As for the embroidery thread, it could have been taken any time weeks ago, even. Someone planning this crime wouldn't necessarily have needed access on the night of Miss Martell's death. Bertrand, interviewed in his office, was as unreadable as ever. I manage a household of over 100 people, Mr. Goodwin. My responsibilities include everything from state dinners to ensuring the toilets function properly. Do I have access to Lord Edmund's apartments? Yes. To the kitchen? Yes. To the Queen's chambers? Yes. To virtually every space in this castle? Yes. Does that make me a suspect? I suppose it does. But consider this. If I wanted to kill Lord Edmund, I could do so in 100 ways that wouldn't require framing an innocent chef or murdering a chambermaid. I'm not that complicated. Inspector Duval declined to be interviewed again, but did provide access to all physical evidence. The tureen that had contained the poisoned soup, the bottle of arsenic found in Gaultier's quarters, the letters, the stone used to kill Miss Martell, and the gold threads recovered from her body. I reported all this to Wolfe over dinner Tuesday evening, a meal that featured venison so perfectly prepared that even Wolfe's resistance to non-Fritz cooking wavered. Interesting, he said when I'd finished. Everyone has access, everyone has some form of alibi, no one has an obvious motive beyond Prince Leon and the Queen herself, both of whom we've effectively eliminated. So we're stuck? No, we're clarifying. Someone in that group is lying or hiding something significant. Our task is to determine which one and why. How? He smiled, the small, satisfied smile that meant he'd had an idea. Tomorrow I'm going to arrange a gathering. Everyone who might be involved. The staff, the ladies-in-waiting, Bertrand, Prince Leon, even the Queen. I'll explain what I've learned, lay out the logical problems with the current narrative, and observe reactions. You're going to smoke them out? I'm going to make them nervous. Nervous people make mistakes, and mistakes reveal truth. Wednesday morning, Duval arranged what he called a briefing in the castle's great hall, a space large enough to accommodate 50 people with room to spare. The Queen attended, along with Prince Leon, Bertrand, the ladies-in-waiting, senior staff including all the kitchen personnel, and even Chef Gaultier, brought under guard. Wolfe stood at the front, Caesar and Loyal flanking him, the other 4 dogs positioned strategically around the room. I'd taken a seat near the back where I could watch faces. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolfe began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. I've spent 3 days investigating Lord Edmund Rothwell's murder and Miss Lucia Martell's death. I've interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, studied the castle's layout and routines, and I've reached several conclusions. First, Chef Gaultier did not kill Lord Edmund. The evidence against him is too convenient, too perfectly arranged. Someone wanted him convicted, wanted him destroyed professionally and personally. Second, the same person killed Miss Martell. Not to silence her testimony that was already recorded, but to create additional confusion, to implicate the Queen's household, to make this investigation so tangled that truth might never emerge. Third, this person knows this castle intimately. They understand its security protocols, its staff routines, its hidden spaces and forgotten corridors. They can move through it invisibly, can plant evidence without detection, can manipulate events with confidence born of insider knowledge. Fourth, this person has a compelling motive. Not merely money, though money may be involved. Something deeper, something that drove them to commit 2 murders and attempt to destroy an innocent man. He paused. The room was absolutely silent. I watched faces, the Queen's carefully neutral expression, Prince Leon's pale intensity, Bertrand's stone mask, the ladies-in-waiting's controlled composure, the kitchen staff's various degrees of nervousness. I don't yet know who this person is, Wolfe continued, but I know what they fear most: discovery. They fear that I'll find the one piece of evidence they couldn't hide, the one witness they couldn't silence, the one logical inconsistency that unravels their entire plan. He looked around the room, meeting eyes, assessing reactions. So I give you fair warning, I will find that evidence. I will expose that inconsistency. And when I do, the person responsible for Lord Edmund and Miss Martell's deaths will face justice. Are you quite finished? It was Lady Isabel, her voice cold with aristocratic disdain. Because frankly, Mr. Wolfe, this sounds like bluster designed to cover the fact that you have no idea who the killer is. Wolfe smiled. You're partially correct. I don't have proof yet, but I have suspicions, and I have methods for testing those suspicions. By tomorrow evening, I'll know everything. How? Prince Leon's voice was strained. By doing what I do best, thinking, observing, and refusing to accept convenient narratives. Now, unless anyone has information they'd like to share, you're all dismissed, except, he pointed, Chef Gaultier. I'd like you to remain. The room emptied slowly, people filing out with backward glances and nervous whispers. When only Gaultier, Devore, the Queen, and we remained, Wolfe turned to Devore. Release him. What? Chef Gaultier. Release him from custody. He's innocent, and keeping him in prison serves no purpose except to satisfy your need for a convenient suspect. I can't do that without evidence. Then consider this evidence. I give you my word, as a detective with an international reputation, that Chef Gaultier did not commit these murders. If I'm wrong, I'll pay his bail myself and personally guarantee his appearance at trial. The Queen spoke quietly. Inspector, release him. I'll take responsibility. Devore's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Very well, but he must remain within the castle grounds and report his whereabouts daily. Gaultier looked stunned. I'm free? You're provisionally free, Wolfe corrected. Don't make me regret this. And I have a request. I'd like you to prepare dinner tomorrow evening. For 20 people. Your finest work. A dinner? Now? After everything? A dinner. It will serve multiple purposes, not least of which is demonstrating your innocence through your art. Can you do it? Gaultier straightened, professional pride overcoming confusion. Of course. Give me the guest list and any dietary restrictions. I'll create something memorable. Excellent. Your Majesty, can you arrange for the relevant people to attend? The ladies-in-waiting, Bertrand, Prince Leon, the senior kitchen staff, a few others? I can. May I ask what you're planning? A revelation, but I need one more day to confirm my suspicions. Until then, trust that all will become clear. That afternoon, I found Wolfe in our suite, surrounded by papers, witness statements, floor plans of the castle, timeline charts I'd prepared, photographs of evidence. The dogs were restless, picking up on his intensity. You know who did it, I said. I have strong suspicions, but I need to verify one critical detail before I'm certain. Which detail? The letters found in Gaultier's quarters. Something about them has been bothering me since Devore first described them. I need to examine them personally. An hour later, we were in Devore's office. The evidence laid out before us. The letters were in French, written in a cramped, emotional hand, clearly someone under significant stress. They detailed Henri Gaultier's resentment of Lord Edmund, his belief that Edmund had destroyed his career, his descent into bitterness and alcohol. Wolfe read them carefully, using gloves to handle the pages. Then he asked, When did Henri Gaultier die? 3 years ago, Devar said. And these letters? Found in Chef Gaultier's quarters, in a locked drawer of his desk. Were they examined for fingerprints? Yes, only Chef Gaultier's prints were found. Interesting. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, what do you notice about the paper? I looked closely. It was standard letter paper, slightly yellowed. Nothing special? Look at the edges. Look at how the paper has aged. I did, and then I saw it. It's not uniformly aged. Some pages are more yellowed than others, even though they're supposedly from the same period. Precisely. Some of these letters are genuine, written by Henri Gaultier years ago, but others are forgeries, created recently to match the style and content. The forger was skilled but not perfect. The paper gives them away. So someone forged letters to frame Chef Gaultier. Yes, someone with access to a few genuine letters, perhaps stolen or copied years ago, who then created additional letters to establish a compelling motive. Inspector, I'll need these analyzed by a document expert. I believe you'll find that at least half are recent forgeries. Devar looked skeptical, but made a note. Even if true, that doesn't identify the forger. No, but it narrows the field considerably. Creating convincing forgeries requires skill, time, and access to samples of Henri Gaultier's handwriting. How many people fit that description? I don't know. Then investigate. Check who had access to the castle's archives, personnel files, historical records. Henri Gaultier applied for a position here 15 years ago. His application would have included writing samples. Who could have accessed those samples? I'll check. Do so immediately. I suspect you'll find your answer illuminating. That evening, I noticed something odd. Loyal, the pit bull who generally stayed close to Wolfe, had taken to following Prince Leon whenever the prince was nearby. It wasn't aggressive attention, just intense observation, the kind of focus that suggested the dog sensed something important. I mentioned it to Wolfe. Interesting. Loyal is the most perceptive of our pack. If he's reacting to Prince Leon, there's a reason. You think the prince is involved? I think the prince knows more than he's revealed. Tomorrow's dinner may clarify exactly how much. Thursday morning brought news. Devar had checked the archives. Personnel files from 15 years ago were stored in a locked room in the administrative wing. Access was restricted to senior staff, Bertrand, the head archivist, and a few others with administrative responsibilities. One person accessed those files repeatedly over the past 2 months. Devar reported, his face grim. Lady Isabelle Frontenac. She claimed to be researching genealogy for a project the Queen assigned her. Was this project real? Her Majesty confirms she asked Lady Isabel to research family connections for a historical documentation project, but the access logs show Lady Isabel spent far more time in those files than such a project would require. I see. Thank you, Inspector. One more request. Have her apartment searched. Look for writing materials, practice pages, anything suggesting forgery work. 2 hours later, Devar returned with a leather portfolio found hidden in Lady Isabel's writing desk. Inside were practice sheets, multiple attempts to replicate Henri Gaultier's handwriting, progressively more successful. She's our forger, Devar said. She's one of our criminals, Wolfe corrected. Whether she's the killer remains to be proven. The dinner that evening was held in a private dining room, smaller and more intimate than the Great Hall, but still elegant enough for royalty. 20 people attended. The Queen, Prince Leon, Lady Isabel, Countess Sophie, Bertrand, Chef Gaultier, and his senior kitchen staff, Devar, a few other household members and us. The meal was extraordinary. Gaultier had created a 7-course progression that demonstrated why he was considered one of Europe's finest chefs. Each dish was art on a plate, each wine pairing perfection. Wolfe ate with evident appreciation, pausing occasionally to comment on technique or flavor. The conversation was careful, polite, avoiding the obvious topic that we were dining with a murderer. After dessert, Wolfe stood. Caesar, who'd been lying near his chair, rose as well. The room grew quiet. Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this excellent meal. Chef Gaultier, you've proven once again why your reputation is well deserved, which makes the attempt to destroy you particularly cruel. He paused, letting that sink in. Lady Isabel's face was perfectly composed. but I saw her hands clench on the table. 3 weeks ago, someone decided that Lord Edmund Rothwell must die. Perhaps they learned he planned to leave Montavia. Perhaps they needed his death for other reasons. But they decided, and they planned carefully. First, they needed a scapegoat. Chef Gaultier was perfect, talented, proud, with a dead brother whose resentment could be exploited. They accessed old personnel files, found samples of Henri Gaultier's handwriting, and spent weeks creating convincing forgeries, letters that established motive, that painted Lionel Gaultier as a man nursing a decade-old grudge. Second, they needed means and opportunity. Arsenic is readily available if you know where to look. Planting it in Gaultier's quarters would have been simple for someone with the right access and authority. Third, they needed a witness. Lucia Martel was young, impressionable, and in need of money. Her family's financial struggles were known to household staff. Someone approached her, offered payment, convinced her to testify that she'd seen Gaultier near Lord Edmund's apartments with a vial of poison. The poisoning itself was relatively straightforward. Gaultier prepared the soup in his usual fashion, left it covered in the service corridor, never suspecting someone would add arsenic during those crucial 15 minutes before delivery. But then complications arose. I was hired. I started investigating, and Lucia Martel, perhaps feeling guilty or frightened, might have reconsidered her testimony. She had to be silenced. So she was lured to the reflecting pool late at night, killed, and her body staged to implicate the Queen's household. The killer needed confusion, needed multiple suspects, needed anything that would draw attention away from themselves. Wolfe looked directly at Lady Isabel. You made 2 critical mistakes. First, you didn't account for modern document analysis. Your forged letters are detectable. Second, you underestimated Lucia Martel's conscience. She was going to recant, wasn't she? She told you she couldn't live with the lie. Lady Isabel stood slowly. Her face was pale but composed. This is speculation. You have no proof. I have the practice sheets found in your apartments. I have the access logs showing your repeated visits to the archives. I have motive. You needed Lord Edmund, dead, and Prince Leon implicated without being obviously connected to the crime yourself. Motive. What possible motive would I have? Love. It was the Queen who spoke, her voice sad. You're in love with Leon, aren't you, Isabel? The room went absolutely silent. Prince Leon looked shocked. Lady Isabel's composure finally cracked. Yes, she said quietly. I love him. I've loved him for years, but he would never marry me, never consider me seriously. While Lord Edmund lived to whisper in his ear about duty and appropriate marriages, and maintaining the bloodline's purity, Edmund wanted Leon to marry some insipid princess from a proper European house, someone who would strengthen alliances and produce heirs. So you killed him, Wolfe said. I freed Leon. I gave him the independence to make his own choices, and I ensured he would have the financial means to do so, by making certain Edmund died before he could dissolve the trust. And Lucia, she was weak. She took my money, agreed to testify, then developed a conscience. She called me Tuesday night, said she was going to tell Inspector Devore that I'd paid her to lie. I couldn't allow that, so I asked her to meet me at the reflecting pool, told her we could work something out, and then she stopped. You killed her, I finished, hit her with a stone, pushed her into the water, planted the gold thread to implicate the Queen's chambers. I had no choice. You had every choice, the Queen said, her voice like ice. You chose murder, twice. Inspector, arrest her. Devore moved forward with handcuffs. Lady Isabel didn't resist, though her eyes went to Prince Leon, pleading. Leon, please. I did this for us, for our future. The prince looked horrified. Isabel, I didn't ask you to. Oh God. She was led away. The room remained silent until the doors closed behind her. Finally, the Queen spoke. Mr. Wolfe, how did you know? Several factors. The forged letters were the key evidence linking Gaultier to the crime, yet they were suspiciously convenient. When I learned Lady Isabel had extensive access to the archives, I suspected her involvement, but motive eluded me until I observed her watching Prince Leon during our initial gathering. The intensity of that gaze, the possessiveness, I recognized obsessive love when I saw it. The confirmation came from my dogs, particularly Loyal. He kept focusing on Prince Leon, but not with hostility, with concern, as if sensing that the prince was connected to danger without being dangerous himself. That suggested someone close to the prince was the threat. Lady Isabel was always nearby, always watching, always hovering. But why frame Gaultier specifically? Chef Gaultier asked. Because you were perfect, talented enough that your downfall would be memorable, isolated enough that few would defend you vigorously, and connected through your brother to a plausible motive. Lady Isabel is intelligent and thorough. She chose her scapegoat carefully. She almost succeeded, Devar said quietly. Almost. But she underestimated two things: the depth of the Queen's determination to find the truth, and the persistence of a good detective. Wolfe smiled slightly. Also, she failed to account for 6 highly trained dogs with an instinct for deception. Prince Leon stood abruptly. "I need air. Excuse me." He left. The Queen watched him go, her expression troubled. "He'll blame himself for this." "Perhaps he should," Wolfe said bluntly. "If he'd been clearer about his feelings or lack thereof toward Lady Isabel, none of this might have happened. Love doesn't work that way, Mr. Wolfe." "No, which is why it causes such problems." We left Castle Belvoir Saturday morning. The Queen had thanked us formally, paid us handsomely, and mentioned quietly that she'd be restructuring her household staff to prevent similar infiltrations of trust. Chef Gaultier, now fully exonerated, had prepared one final breakfast, a masterpiece that Fritz would have appreciated. As we ate, he'd thanked Wolfe with tears in his eyes, promised to name a dish after him, and generally behaved as if we'd saved his life, which I supposed we had. The flight home was easier than the outbound journey. The dogs were experienced travelers now, and Wolfe was visibly relaxed. The case was solved, justice was done, and he was heading back to his orchids and his routines. Satisfied? I asked somewhere over the Atlantic. Adequately. The case was more complex than it first appeared, but not impossibly so. Lady Isabel was clever but not brilliant. She made mistakes, and mistakes are always fatal to murder schemes. What do you think will happen to her? Montavian law is relatively humane. Life imprisonment, most likely. Though I suspect the real punishment will be seeing Prince Leon marry someone else and move on with his life. Harsh. Murder is harsh, Archie. The consequences should match. We landed at JFK just after sunset. Saul was waiting with the van. He'd arranged transportation that could accommodate 6 large dogs and 2 tired travelers. The drive to West 35th Street felt shorter than it was. The brownstone looked perfect. Theodore had maintained everything beautifully. Fritz had prepared a welcome home feast, and even the orchids seemed to have missed Wolfe's presence. But the best moment came Monday morning. Inspector Kramer arrived at 11, letting himself in as usual, bellowing, "Wolfe, I heard you were playing detective in Europe. How'd it go?" He stopped in the doorway. All 6 dogs had responded to his voice, but instead of the suspicious attention they'd give a stranger, they relaxed. Caesar's tail actually wagged, and Loyal trotted over for a head scratch. "They remember me," Kramer said, looking surprised and pleased. "Of course they do," Wolfe grunted from his chair. "You've been visiting this house for years. They're guards, not amnesiacs." Still, Kramer scratched Caesar behind the ears. "It's nice to be recognized." "Inspector, sit down. Fritz will bring beer. Tell me what disasters New Yorkers suffered in my absence." "You first. I want to hear about the Castle case. Rumor is you exposed a murderess who'd framed a famous chef." So I told the story, the whole thing, from the royal invitation to Lady Isabel's arrest. Kramer listened with the professional attention of a cop who'd spent 40 years evaluating cases, and when I finished, he nodded approval. "Clean work, though bringing 6 dogs to a castle seems excessive." "They were essential," Wolfe said. Loyal detected emotional subterfuge that I might have missed. Caesar provided security. The others maintained vigilance in an uncertain environment. I wouldn't have solved the case as quickly without them. "If you say so. Still, I'll bet the Queen wasn't thrilled about Dobermans in the throne room." "The Queen," Wolfe said with satisfaction, "adapted, as do all sensible people when confronted with necessity." Kramer stayed for lunch. Fritz had prepared roasted chicken with herbs and vegetables that made restaurant food look primitive. The conversation ranged from murders solved to orchids acquired to the general state of crime in New York versus European castles. When Kramer finally left, I returned to the office to find Wolfe reading an orchid catalogue. Caesar stretched out beside his chair, and the world returned to its proper order. "Glad to be home?" I asked. "Immensely. Though I admit the case was interesting, the food was exceptional, and the Queen was a remarkable woman." "So you travel again, if another royal invitation arrived?" "Absolutely not. Once per lifetime is sufficient for castles, aristocrats, and international intrigue. Want to bet on that?" He glared at me. "I'm not placing bets with you, Archie. You have an unfair advantage." "Which is?" "You're invariably correct about my eventual decisions." I grinned. He returned to his catalogue, and somewhere in the house, one of the dogs barked, probably Diana, announcing a squirrel in the backyard. Life in the brownstone had returned to normal, at least until the next case arrived.